Well, hello everybody. I'm Eric, your instructor, and today we're going to be going over more diagramming. So, welcome to MiniLec2, and this is really in preparation for the Project 2 problem formulations, which is coming up. It's due on the 27th. So, let's get started. What are we covering today? Well, I wanted to do a quick recap of the concepts that we learned in the lecture before. We're then going to learn something new, how to diagram a loop. Lastly, we're going to go through a Project 2 oriented example of diagramming. Hopefully, these should be some great resources when you're actually working on your problem formulations. So, a data flow chart. That's what we've been using. It's a visual model helping us to lay out our program, and we include inputs and outputs to the program, data processing actions the program takes, decisions the program makes, and types of data our program creates or uses. And it requires no code. The components are here. An external entity is something outside the system that interacts with the system. We have a process, which is some sort of data processing action taken by your program. We then have a data flow, which describes the information transferring between different parts of the system. And then we have our decision diamond, which is a fork in your program where the program makes a decision. Let's just take a look at the components here. This is what an external entity looks like. This is a data flow. This is a process, and this is a decision diamond. Very different, very basic example. A interest calculator. Let's say the interest rate comes from the bank and the balance of the bank account and the years that you want to calculate interest for are coming from the user. Let's say it's an online program. We then have the interest calculation, which is a process. The future value, which is what the balance would be after X number of years, is the data flow output of the interest calculation. So then we're formatting that in a string that the user can read, and then we are displaying it to the user. Now, these two users are the same. It's totally fine to reuse an entity. The reason I've done it is just for visual layout. I don't want to create an arrow that goes all the way back here. That would probably make the diagram more confusing. But you're free to lay it out how you see fit. Let's jump to something new. How do we diagram a loop? And we're going to start with for loops. When we first reach a for loop, we'll likely have a list as a data flow, and that'll be plural. We're essentially then going to switch to singular. So we'll be writing steps as if we were working on just one item. I'll give you an example in a second. We'll have an arrow pointing from the last of the 4 steps to the beginning of the for loop, okay? So I wanted to start a new diagram here, and I'm going to talk about an example. We'll go to our very basic example here. Count how many times John is included in a list of names. We're also going to print John when John is found. Lastly, we're going to print John is in the list X times at the end as a summary. Okay? So let's take a look here. I'm going to go to the site that we're using. It's just simply draw.io. We can create a new diagram. I'm creating one on my device, but we can also do one on Google Docs. Creating a new blank diagram here, and I'm going to save it in the INST126 folder here, and I'll call it loops example live, because I already have a loops example. All right, so this file here can be downloaded from Elms. I've put it there, and it has basically our different entities that we can copy and paste. Just makes our life a little easier so we don't have to hunt through the menus about where to find everything. So we're going to start with an external entity. In this case, we'll assume the list is coming from the user. So the user is giving us a list of names, and we can select it by, we can draw an arrow by selecting one of these little nubs here and dragging down. double click on here to add names. All right. And we'll call this user. So we have our list of names. Now, this is where I mentioned before, we're switching to the singular, okay? And we're gonna do that with a decision diamond. And we're going to decide for each name if the name is John, all right? So name is John. We have our question mark with a decision. If the name is not John, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to run this decision again for the next name. So actually, we can just draw an arrow, and it may take a little bit to play around with it, but we can just connect it back here. And it's gone to the other side, but we can just drag it there, okay? And oopsies, sometimes you'll have to play around with it a little bit to get it to work properly. Where has my arrow gone? There we go. All right, I played around with it a little bit, and oh no, it's reversed. Sorry, give me a second, folks. Now we can drag this one here, drag this up, drag this down. There we go. That's better. It'll usually work a little bit more easily for you guys because you'll generally have more than one step in your loop. But this is no, right? So no will occur if the name is not John, and it will just go and run through that loop again. Now, what if the name is John? Well, we're going to have yes as another option here. And then what did we say in our slide here? We wanted to count how many times John is included in a list of names, and we wanted to print John when John is found. So we have two things we want to do. We can sort of do that two ways, but let's copy a process from here. All right, let's paste this here. So our first process is going to be print John. Print, I'll just say John is found message, okay? And if you see this get cut off, you can select this here and then kind of drag it. It's like a text field. All right, so printing this message, where did this message go? Well, the message actually goes back to the user, and I'll create another user rather than just sending it back here, and I'll put it down here, and you'll see why in a little bit. And we'll just say John is found message. Okay, excellent. We then have another thing that we needed to do, which is update the John count, how many times we found John. So we'll take another process and we'll paste it here. We'll update it to 2.0, and we'll say update John count. So in terms of data flows, there really isn't technically data flowing from this process to this one. I would say it's fine to use an arrow. There's no data flowing, but so this would technically represent the control, but I think that's okay. Technically, you could also create two arrows, right? You could kind of split this arrow here and have it point to two, sort of like parallel, but this is totally fine. So after this, just like on the other side, we're gonna run this decision for the next name. So we have a loop here, and this is something you can see a little bit better, but it's circular, right? So we have these sort of two loops on each side, but it's really a loop process, okay? So lastly, we've got 1.0, 2.0. We have now gone through all the different names. So what is the output of this gonna be? Well, really the output of the for loop is the John count, right? John count. And then the last process we're gonna run, let's copy it again from here, is we're going to format the John count message. I don't know what just happened there. All right. 3.0, format John count message, right? And then we are going to print that. We're just going to run the data flow here, and we can just say something like John count message, okay? So that's our flow here. We have basically this triangle is everything in the for loop. And then once the for loop is done, we can just say basically the main output of this whole for loop process, which is the number of times John was found. Excellent. We'll go back to our lecture here. Let's talk about a while loop. And with a while loop, we may not be starting with a list, okay? But we still have a series of steps. But we have a conditional somewhere at the beginning or the end, right? And that conditional will say whether we want to continue the loop. So we'll still see that kind of circular loop structure, but it is with a conditional in it somewhere. We then have an arrow pointing back to or from the conditional. The reason I say to or from is because the conditional could be at the beginning or it could be at the end. We saw a conditional at the end with this previous diagram, although this conditional is not actually used to control the while loop. It's just done for each name. So let's take a look at a while loop here. And the example we're going to do is asking the user if they want to generate a random number. We then print the random number, and then we run this loop until they say no, okay? And this is something you probably don't know how to do in Python just yet. You can generate a random number, but we don't have to know that because this is just a diagram. So let's get started with that. We're actually going to start this time with a process, and we're going to ask the user whether they want a random number. Ask user whether they want a random number, okay? And again, I'll have to expand this because that thing is kind of small in there. That's our 1.0 step. So what is this going to do? This actually is going to prompt our external entity, which is the user. So we'll draw an arrow here, and it's going to random number prompt. And for formatting, I'll move prompt to the next line. Okay, so let's copy an external entity from here. Let's paste it, and this is going back to our other diagram up there. Here we have our external entity. We'll call it user. And then the user will respond. And the user will respond with, we can call it something descriptive. We can just call it random number answer. So the answer to whether they want a random number. Okay, so we've got that data flowing there, and then this data flows back. We then are actually going to have our while loop conditional. So this is this is our stopping condition. This controls the while loop because we're going to run this as long as they say yes, right? So we'll pass this yes, no, and then just say wants random number, right? So something descriptive. It doesn't have to be anything in particular. So we ask the user whether they want the random number, and we're passing a yes or no to this decision diamond. If they say no, that's pretty easy. We're just done, right? We don't really have to have it go anywhere, or we could put something like, you know, print goodbye, but I'll just leave it out for now, just so it's clear that the loop only continues if they say yes. So if they say yes, we'll move to this side here, and then we'll create something, generate random number, all right? We don't know how to do that yet, but this is a diagram, so we can do whatever we want. Here we go, generate random number. All right, so what are we passing here? Well, we'll just put a yes here, right? Because Again, this is more of a control than a data flow, but that's okay. It's an arrow. So what is the output of generating a random number? Well, pretty simply, it's a random number. Excellent. What are we going to do with that? Well, we're going to format the random number. So we'll copy this here, and we'll move it here, and choose 3.0. Format random number. And this will be formatted to say something like your random number is 9.9. Okay, so it's, you know, in a very complex program, maybe you wouldn't need stuff like this, but this just kind of helps us show the steps. Okay, so where is this random number going to go? Well, we're going to go send it back to the user. So I'll just take our user, and I could draw an arrow from here to here, but I don't feel like doing that. So I will instead just copy the user over here, and just will say this here is the formatted random number. And here are my terrible typing skills coming into play. Well, there's one more thing to do. We're just going to pass the control back to the loop here. We'll complete our little circuit, right? So so let's go through this once more time. We have a process to ask the user whether they want a random number. The random number prompt is sent to the user. The random number answer of the user is sent back. So we then have yes or no, whether they want a random number. If it's yes, then we're going to generate a random number. And then we'll send this random number to the process that formats it, and then we'll send that to the user. After that, we'll pass our control back to 1.0 and prompt the user again. So that's how you can do loops in the data flow chart. All right. So let's take one more example that's kind of Project 2 focused. Project 2 is really about a lot of strings and loops and stuff like that. So I think this will be useful. It doesn't contain loops, but it does contain strings and lists. So yeah. All right. So you've seen an example like this in lecture. This is pretty much actually the same thing as we've seen and played around with a little bit. But this is a fixed length file, string, that's a part of the bursor process at UMD. And what this contains is sort of the find type, the batch number, the ID of the person who got the find, the first 3 characters of their last name, and then the actual find amount. So what we want to do is we want to pull out 4 things. We want to pull out the batch number. In this case, it's 13370. We want to pull out the ID number, which is LB1304925 here. We're then going to pull out the first 3 of their last name. And then lastly, we're going to pull out the find amount. And the find amount is going to be $8. Okay, it says 800 here, but this is a fixed length file, and it is assumed that there's a dot there, right? So it's $8. And we'll also, in number 3, additionally be fixing the capitalization. So we're going to capitalize the first letter. After all of that's done, we've pulled out all the data. We're going to print out the output nicely formatted. So this is going to be a little bit more involved. So let's create a new file here. So I'll just click Start, click Create New Diagram, blank diagram, and I'll save this as MiniLec2 Live. Oh, it's so cool. I love the name Live. I feel like I'm a rock star or something. Let's get started. What are we going to start with? Well, this string presumably is coming from UMD's financial system. Oops. UMD's financial system. Well, really it's coming from a program I made, but we'll just pretend that that's the truth. Let's just say financial system. Okay. So what are we going to do first? Well, first we're going to want to split the string, right? Let's go back here, and I'm actually going to take a screenshot here so we don't have to keep going back and forth. All right, It's quite loud. Let me move it here. Actual size. Whoa, that's big. Okay, let me make this a little bit smaller. I don't want to make you guys sit going back and forth between the two screens. Excellent. Okay, so we have our string here. If we want first the batch number, which remember is 13370, we need to split the string into pieces. I think that's the easiest way to go. Okay, so we'll just create a new process called splitting the string, right? And what's this giving us? We're getting the find string from the financial system, and that find string is going into our 1.0 process, and we've decided to split the string. What that'll do is it'll actually create a list, and the list will have each basically chunk here in it, right? So one of them will have MCK 13370, the next one will have this chunk, and it's dividing based on these spaces that you see. And just kind of thinking through how we'd solve the problem. Okay, so split string. And then we're going to have 4 different sections. We're going to have, all right, substring 1, substring 1. We're going to have substring 2. We're going to have substring 3, and then we're going to have substring 4. Okay, let me just format a little bit here. Substring 4. Cool. So what are we going to do? Let's start with one by one. Let's start with substring 1. Okay, and let's copy this, and we're going to paste this. And what we'll do is is there a crop function here? Yes, there is. Let's crop it to there. Okay, excellent. So this is our substring 1. So we're going to create a new process for the substring. And sorry, this should have been 1.0 here. Let's copy this here. What are we going to do first with our substring 1? I'm going to move this over here. You'll be playing around with formatting a little bit. Well, first of all, we really want to end up with a number. The batch number is 13370. So we want to first remove non-numeric characters. Okay, so that's the first step. And this is 2.0. The next step, the result of this is going to be a numeric string, right? It's still going to be a string, but it will be numeric. What's the next step? Copy this. 3.0. Well, we can just convert numeric string to integer, right? Pretty simple. Okay. And that's that. Really, that gets us to where we need to be. We should just be at this string, the number 13370 at that point. All right, so let's move on. And actually, one thing I want to do here, so I had 2.0 and 3.0. This isn't necessary, but I'd actually like to change this instead to 2.1 because we're kind of splitting things into parallel processes here. Okay, so I think it'll make it a little clearer. Well, what about this next string? Let me copy this here and let's crop it again just so you can see what's going on. Okay, apply, and I'll shrink this down a little bit. This is what we're getting. So this here is the ID. If we go back here, we want the batch number and we also want the ID number. Well, we already have it. That's it. So we can kind of just leave that as is, and we'll get back to the arrows in a second. Let's go on to substring 3. What is substring 3? Substring 3 is the first 3 characters of the last name. So I'll crop this down. And we've got Mac here. Oh, that's big. Okay, make you a little bit smaller there. All right, so what do we need to do in substring 3? Well, really the only thing we have to do is we need to fix the capitalization. Okay. And yeah. And then lastly, we have our substring 4, and this is the most complex out of all of them, but it's not too bad. Let's crop this again just to see what we're looking at here. And keep in mind, folks, that I'm just doing a kind of a quick and dirty cropping job here. This actually technically, when we're splitting it, it won't include the spaces, okay? So let me just fix this to make it a little bit more clear. The same thing for here, right? I've included the space in the crop, but it's not actually going to be there. And the same thing here. So let me crop this a little bit as well. You don't have to do this kind of cropping. I'm just doing it to hopefully illustrate it a little bit for you. So let me move this string out a little bit. And let's take a 4.0 here, okay? I'll drag this arrow down to connect. We've got our substring 4 coming into here. And that substring 4 is going to be 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 8, 0, 0, and then this little thing here. First thing we want to do, just like over in our 2.0, is we actually want to remove non-numeric characters. Just like we got our little curly bracket there. So let's get rid of that because we can't convert it to an integer while that is there. It looks like I cropped out one of the zeros. That's okay. So what's our next step? Okay, well, what's the result of this step? It's going to be, again, a numeric string. So what do we do with a numeric string? Well, this is 4.1. Let us convert to integer. Okay? So what's the result of that? It's going to be integer, right? But I remember this, there's a dot there. So really what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to divide it by 100, right? Because we're going to get 800 from this string here. So let's choose step 4.2. 4.2 here. Divide by 100. And this will give us the fine amount. Okay, so there's really only one more thing we need to do, and that is format the message to be displayed by the user, because remember that was actually part of the slide here, print out the output nicely formatted. So we're just going to have format the message here. What data do we need for this message? Well, we really need the data for all of these substrings after they've been processed. So let's take a look at this first column again. This is substring 1. This is the batch number. We have converted it from a numeric string into an integer. So what's the result? The result is the batch number as an integer. What about this one? This one we skipped over, but basically when we split the string, we just get the ID. We don't really have to do anything with it, right? So we can just draw this arrow down to here. And if you want to clarify it, you could just change this to ID, right? Because, yeah, I think that'll do just fine. Well, we then have this substring 3 going into fixed capitalization here. And once we've done that, that is our first 3 of last name. And lastly, what do we have here? Well, we've been working with the fine amount. We've removed the non-numeric characters. We've converted it to an integer, and then we divide it by 100. So what we get is the fine amount. Fine amount. And then lastly, we could just display the fine message to the user. So I'll just copy an external entity from this page here. And then we'll do formatted Excellent. Well, this is our diagram here. And of course we could, if you care, go through and clean it up a little bit, right? Move things around. Something like this would be totally sufficient for your final submission. You can spend more time working on it and cleaning it up. Of course, it should be readable and understandable and not super messy, but there's like some little things here kind of going through. That's okay. That's kind of how this works. This is totally fine. So hopefully this clarifies the diagramming process for you. We've gone through how to do different types of loops, but we've also taken a more complex problem and we've broken it down into steps. Really, it's just taking a bullet pointed list, and then sort of those other lists have other bullet points over them and kind of translating it into a diagram, right? So hopefully this makes some sense. So that's pretty much what I got for you folks. Thank you very much. And remember, Project 2 problem formulations are coming up.